I begin in the name of the God whose mercy is profound, whose kindness is forever. In this series of Why Islam, I'm going to today talk about 3 remaining questions regarding life hereafter. In the last episode, I mentioned the fact that the Quran mentions 4 questions that one confronts. They come to our mind regarding the life hereafter. Why should there be life hereafter? How is life hereafter possible? When is it going to happen? And where is all this going to take place? We already talked about why should there be a life hereafter. Now I'm going to take the next 3 questions. How is life hereafter possible? Before I mention answers to these questions, let me say that this question has 2 parts. How is it possible that the life that we are living in, our own physical existence, how is it going to be redone, recreated? That's one part. The other part is that even if we were somehow to be created yet again, how is the all-important information going to be made available for the process of accountability to take place? The Quran, true to its promise that it answers all vital important questions regarding beliefs, answers these questions adequately. Let's take the first question. How is it possible for humans to be physically recreated? But before I talk about the answers of the Quran to this question, let me introduce you to criticism that the Quran has mentioned regarding this possibility. Well, there are a number of passages in the Quran wherein we find that the disbelievers are talking about the fact that it is simply not possible for humans to be recreated. And the Quran, you know what, mentions those criticisms in such a strong, clear, and apparently convincing way that if you didn't know the answer for a short while, you would certainly be impressed by the rhetoric, the force of arguments of the disbelievers. That's what the Quran does. It doesn't ask the reader to have blind faith in what the book is saying. It asks the individual who is going through the verses of the book to use her intellect. And for that purpose, it's absolutely essential that we look at the arguments of the other side, those who are opposing and disagreeing, with an open mind. And the arguments need to be considered in a way that whatever is presented by them is understood honestly. We are not presenting their views in a way that they appear to be weak right at the beginning. So let me mention one passage. It's chapter 23, Surah Al-Mu'minun, verses 35 to 36. The Quran says, that quoting the disbelievers, does he promise, that is, the Prophet, does he promise you that when you will have died and become dust and bones, you will be resurrected once again? Hayhata, far-fetched is what you have been promised. So, very strong denial of the possibility is what has been mentioned in the Quran over and over again from the disbelievers. Now, how does the Quran respond to these objections? The Quran says, number 1, God created humans in the first place, and therefore it would not be a problem for him to create them yet again. So he mentions in Surah number 10, verse 4, to him is your return, all of you together. It is the true promise of God. He is the one who initiates creation, thereafter he'll repeat it. That is, how could you imagine that it would not be possible beyond the limits of possibilities of God Almighty, that He created you in the first place, but He will not be able to create you yet again on a second occasion. Likewise, the Quran also mentions that the heavens and the earth, this universe, the way it has been created, that in itself gives a very clear understanding that the one who has created this existence is fully capable of doing anything. So in chapter 79, verses 27 onwards, God says, "Are you a more difficult creation or the heavens? He created it." And then goes on to mention the different aspects of the creation. So in other words, when He can create this brilliant existence, universe, how is it possible that He will not be able to create humans once again after they are dead? A third interesting argument the Quran mentions on a number of occasions is that we should have a look at the plants, the way they grow, and they grow every year, and they grow each season after the soil is apparently dead. It comes back to life. So the Quran mentions, for example, in verse 17 of chapter 57, "Know that God gives life to the soil after it's dead. اعلموا أن الله يحيي الأرض بعد موتها." In other words, you see for yourself every year, every season, that the soil is as if dead. There is no growth, there is no plantation. And then rain falls and the soil all of a sudden comes back to life. When this can happen every year in the case of plants, crops, how is it possible that you imagine that it will not be another possibility for humans to come back to life again, like the plants come back to life every year, every season? Then the next question, how is God going to make humans accountable? That is, what are going to be the sources of information that God will avail, make use of, in order for humans to be held accountable? The Quran mentions a number of different possibilities. Number one, God is fully knowledgeable. In other words, God's knowledge is complete, perfect. Therefore, it would not be a problem for Him to have information that would be necessary for humans to be held accountable. So, for example, verse 4 of chapter 64, the Almighty says, "He knows what is in the heavens and the earth, and He knows what you conceal and what you declare. Wallahu alimun bizatis sudur," and God knows what is in the hearts. So God is perfectly knowledgeable. He knows everything. The fact that He is running the affairs of this world itself is a reality that necessitates that God should have full knowledge of everything. Because without full information and knowledge, you cannot run, you cannot administer, you cannot cause a machinery, an existence to continue to function. So God knows everything, and therefore when He will arrange for humans to be held accountable for the deeds that they performed in the worldly life, it will not be a big problem for Him to do. Then He also mentions in the Quran that there are angels on the right side and the left side of us, on our shoulders, not visible, but agile and always ready to write down whatever we do, whatever we say. So the Almighty says in chapter 50, 17 and 18, "Ma yalfizu min qawlin illa ladayhi raqibun atid." There is no word that they utter, but there is already a prepared scribe writing it. In other words, everything that we do, everything that we say is all getting written. And there is going to be no difficulty for the Almighty to arrange for the important information, all information that will be necessary for the process of accountability to be made available. Likewise, the Quran also mentions the fact that the limbs of our body, this body that right now is under our control for a short while, these parts, these limbs of the body are going to speak against the people who use them incorrectly, injudiciously. So the Quran mentions, for instance, in chapter 41, verses 20-21, says, "Their ears, their eyes, and their skins shall testify against their misdeeds." So humans are going to be held accountable, and they will find, to their dismay, to their shock, that their own bodies will start speaking against them. Their ears, their eyes, their skins, and other parts of the body that they employed for evil purposes are going to speak out against them, and they will say that we have been given the ability to speak the same way as the Almighty gave the tongue the ability to speak in the worldly life. One might ask as to why these arrangements are going to be made apart from God's own knowledge, when God's knowledge should have been enough. But then we know that there is this rule in law, in political science, that is quite often mentioned, that justice should not only be done, but should appear to have been done. So, because God Almighty would want that justice should be done on the day of judgment in its perfect form, He will make sure that it is not just that His own knowledge would be a source for humans to be held accountable. There would be other external factors, sources that are going to be employed for the purpose. In addition, the Quran tells us that God is also going to ask the people, more particularly the messengers and the prophets, as well as other good, pious humans who delivered God's message to the people, and yet their messages were ignored. God will also ask them to testify against the people whom they had informed properly and convincingly about God's expectations from them. And then He will ask them, those who were informed properly, to respond to this claim that they knew well what they were supposed to do. So that arrangement is also going to be there in place. When is the Day of Judgment going to take place? Although the Quran mentions this question, yet the fact of the matter is that the Almighty also clarifies that this is a non-question. It's a question which is raised by people who don't want to understand the reality about the life hereafter. In other words, who just wanted to debate for the sake of debating, who wanted to bring forth arguments simply to silence the other party. So they were asked that if the Day of Judgment and the Day of Accountability is so important, why don't you not tell us what exactly is going to be the date of its arrival? Why can't you inform us about the complete details of its schedule, which is going to be followed in order for the accountability to take place? God mentions on a number of occasions, like for instance in chapter 79, verses 42 onwards, He says, "They ask you about the hour of judgment. When is it going to arrive?" And then goes on to answer, "What do you, O Prophet, have to do with its description?" In other words, it's not your responsibility to let people know when the Day of Judgment is going to come. "Innama anta munziru man yakhshaha." You are only to warn people about its impending arrival, those people who are ready, prepared to understand it, who are willing to know the truth. As far as its timings are concerned, only God knows about them. كَأَنَّهُمْ يَوْمَ يَرَوْنَهَا لَمْ يَلْبَثُوا إِلَّا عَشِيَّةً أَوْ ضُحَاهَا. As far as the Day of Judgment is concerned, when it is actually going to arrive, these disbelievers are going to imagine as if the life that they had spent earlier in the world was either of a length of a morning or that of an evening. So it would become so insignificant in their eyes that they would think as if it was not longer than a part of a day. The question as to where the life hereafter is going to unfold itself, although it was not raised by the disbelievers, yet there is a Quranic verse that responds to this question as well. It's a verse of chapter 14, verse 48. It says, يَوْمَ تُبَدَّلُ الْأَرْضُ غَيْرَ الْأَرْضِ وَالسَّمَاوَاتِ. It's going to happen on the day when this earth, this planet, is going to be replaced by another planet, another earth. Likewise, the entire universe, all the heavenly bodies. In other words, the process of accountability and thereafter the decision to keep people in either heaven, paradise, or hell. There is not going to be any dearth of space for God to implement His plan. This huge universe, whose expanse, vastness is still unfathomable. Science, despite all its developments and progress, has not as yet been able to get an idea of how big this universe is. The Almighty says that on the Day of Judgment, it's going to be converted into a new existence, and the entire process of accountability and rewards and punishments are going to be staged in this existence. There are people, philosophers, atheists, who make fun of the fact that most part of this huge universe is useless, has nothing to offer, has no role to play in the scheme of this world. Bertrand Russell, for example, was one of them. He used to ridicule that on the one hand, you claim that your God is wise. On the other, what we find is that this world of ours is a tiny speck compared to this huge existence that surrounds us. And it's all useless. It's barren, lifeless. So what is the purpose? Why did your wise God do it? Why did He create it? It is as if the Almighty is responding to Bertrand Russell and many other atheists and philosophers like him, that this huge existence is there to make sure that before the Day of Judgment arrives and before the accountability takes place and then people are given to live in their respective places where they would be declared deserving to live in, their space is already made available. So that we have enough space to accommodate everybody in this big universe. It is as if we have already arranged for the land on which houses are going to be made, people are going to be given residences to live in.